Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Mike Domitrz, who is one of the founding experts for helping institutions create a culture of respect. Mike, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on.
Hey, so I love when we see foundations, organizations, or movements really focus on just an element that many times, I'm sure you would agree, just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. You know, oh yeah, we need to show respect, sure. But you're building a whole platform around that. Give us a little bit of background on yourself and then what made you focus on respect.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, the mission started in a very different place than people would think when it comes to organizations, corporations, businesses, associations. For me, it came from a personal perspective. I was a college student at the time. This was now over 30 years ago, and just on 30 years ago. And I received a phone call that the youngest of my older sisters had been raped. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was 1989. At the time, this was not a subject matter that was in the news much. And so I was very lost, very confused. And what I would learn over time is how little we place respect in relationships and how crimes like sexual assaults are crimes of power. People abuse power. And that starts by failing to treat someone with respect. And so what I would learn is I'd talk to friends and say, hey, do you ask? Do you do these things? And people's like, who asked? We had a culture that just took people for granted, that just took people's boundaries for granted. And so I started speaking out at that time in schools, in middle schools and high schools, and then it became universities, and then it became universities, and then then it became military. And then people in recent years said, hey, could you help companies with this? But a different viewpoint. So what we're doing in companies, when people hear rape or sexual assault, they said, well, what's that to do with the corporate world? Well, that's not what we're doing. What we're doing with them specifically is helping them realize where a failure of building a culture of respect has impacted them across the board. Now, it could be by sexual violence happening in the workplace, which we know by the news coverage now that is actually happening, where people want to deny that forever. Now we know that's happening. Okay, that's worst case scenario. What are the small versions of aggression or disrespect that build up, that create this culture that lacks respect in a company, that leads to people leaving and never telling what happened because of, for whatever reason, they might not have felt safe coming forward? And so you lose wonderful, amazing people. You have retention problems. You have productivity problems. You have all these problems because you fail to address building a culture of consent and respect in the corporate atmosphere.
You know, and it's kind of like the concept of the tipping of the dominoes. You know, you tip that one and just look at the ripple effect that it has. So it can lead up to, it's a precursor. So it's one of those metrics that a lot of people would never have crossed their mind that would, if you look 4 steps down the road, explode into this event, this item, whether it's like in your sister's example or in business examples. What have you found are some of these bigger type incidents that respect kind of leads up to that we want to prevent?
Well, and that's where I'm going to actually change the discussion a little bit there. When we think of the big topic, the big cases that make the news, it actually hurts people from getting involved and caring about this within their own organization. Because what they do is they go, Harvey Weinstein, Epstein, and they start naming all these cases, and they go, well, we're not them. Yeah. I would never do that. My people would never do that. And so they disengage and they think never here. Well, the problem as soon as you think never here is that, let's say you have a company with 50 employees or 100 employees. You have lots of people that have experienced sexual violence in your company. That's a given based on the number of people you have in the workplace. You have a number of people that have experienced being disrespected, disregarded in your company because purely by pure numbers, they've experienced that in their lifetime. And that impacts how they view how you treat them. That impacts how they get triggered in the workplace. All of this gets impacted by that. And when you say never here to every employee who's ever felt disrespected, disregarded, they feel you don't care. It shows ignorance, it shows indifference, and it shows that you're willing to hide the predators of this, the people who commit this, because you're walking around going never here, so they have nothing to fear because they know that everybody will trust them because it never happens here. And therefore, it's easier for them to prey on others. And so what we're talking about now is, what are the small things we all do? Instead of thinking of the Weinstein cases, what are things every one of us do, Mike, that can lead to somebody feel like they're being disrespected? And that's a major problem. Harvard Business Review showed that over 50% of employees did not feel respected on a daily basis by their leadership. Wow. Think about that. Yeah. And in that same survey, it showed the number one influence on an employee's well-being, productivity, problem-solving, creativity was respect. So but we're failing to address the number one problem.
The senior management wants maximum productivity out of these people, but they're not getting the respect they need to then work optimally.
Exactly. And what happens is because senior leadership's going, but we're not those horrible cases. Yeah. And what they're forgetting is the average workplace. That Harvard Business Review was the average workplace. The average workplace has all these signs of disrespect built in because it's how we've been taught to survive in the corporate workplace. Yeah. Is to take control, is to dominate, is to conquer. And that leads to a lot of disrespectful behavior, even in the most subtle of ways.
Well, if we want to eliminate a catastrophe, then the smart thing to do is start working backwards and say, how do we not get to that point? And then how do we not to get to this point and this point? So what are some of these red flags? And you call them daily displays of disrespect. What are some of these daily displays of disrespect that we can watch out for in the workplace?
Yeah, there's 9 of them. And when I bring this up, what's really important for all our listeners to think about is a lot of times people will listen to this and go, who do I know that does that in the workplace? And they forget to go, when do I do that in the workplace?
Yeah.
Or when do I do that even at home? Because if I do it at home, there's a good chance it might leak out at the workplace too. So you can take all these into mind in personal and work. I'll give you a classic example, is silence. Now, this is one people never think of. So I'm throwing one out at you that people wouldn't normally think of on purpose. And people go, what do you mean silence? I come to you, Mike, and I'm really excited about this idea. And I blat it all out. I'm so excited. I'm so passionate. And you look at me blank-faced. Now, what's happening is, if you're looking at me blank-faced, it's most likely because you're trying to process, right? But what happens to the person who shared that is they feel like they've just been ignored. Like there's no response. And so if you're a high processor, you're sitting there going, I need to think, and you're thinking it through. Like, this doesn't make sense, but you're thinking it through. And the person who just shared their heart out, this idea, thinks they're being ignored. And it's very, very defeating. And people go, well, that's just somebody's natural response to be silent. Yes, but then respond that you need time. And that little method takes it from a moment of disrespect to this wonderful moment of total respect. So now, Mike, instead of looking quietly, you like, I'm just not responding, I go, hey, thanks, Mike, for sharing. I'm a high processor. I'm going to need a little time to take it all in because I want to make sure I come back with a really thought out, really understand how I view it, and that takes time for me.
Yeah.
When can I get back to you later today? Or you could say tomorrow or the next day. Now it tells me you were listening. You're engaged, right? Versus just looking quietly at me for 5 to 10 seconds and going, I'm not really sure. All right, respect the person by going, hey, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I want to process this the right way for me to be able to think. And it's so powerful. And that's a great example. People think, I never thought of that as disrespect. Silence can be an awful form of disrespect.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people might think way back in the day when they were growing up and their parents said, if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, so I'm just going to be quiet. And then that's not the way that it's being interpreted.
That's exactly correct. And what they're doing wrong there is they're forgetting that the nice is, thank you so much for sharing. Say something nice.
Yeah.
So you do have a choice to say something nice versus not saying anything at all. Yeah. Thank you for sharing is the nice. When can I get back to you? Right? So you put it all together. So that's one. That's just one of the 9 things. A very classic, another one that happens a lot is, especially passionate leaders. If they're listening, almost all of them will relate to this next one. It's what we call being bulldozed. And that is, you're so excited. You run in the room and you just start throwing out this new idea you have, this new solution you have, and you're just throwing it out and doing it with such command and such passion that while you think you're just sharing, everybody else feels like you're telling. This is what's going to happen. This is what's next. And it feels like they're being bulldozed. Everything's being bulldozed off their desk because this has to take center stage because this is what you're doing. And it can be really rude. It can absolutely be a failure to be sensitive to what other people have going on. But it's something that's very common about high overachieved, passionate leaders. They tend to bulldoze. So what's way smarter, flip it to a choice of respect instead of disrespect, is to walk in, share the idea, and let others lead. Way more powerful. All right, so now I walk in and I go, hey, what would be your reactions to this idea? And let the others lead the conversation. Sit back. Yeah. What the bulldozer tends to do is they tend to bulldoze and not really look for anything but confirmation. Right? And so everybody feels like this is just a manipulation. Like you come in and go, I have this great idea. What do you think about it? And the moment you push back, they're like, come on, how can you not be excited? Yeah. Well, why'd you ask me what I thought of it if you didn't want my input?
The decision was already made.
Yeah, and we talk about this, and others have talked about this too. It's this needing confirmation without being honest about that. Like if that's what you need, you should walk in the room and go, right now, I just need some positive feedback on this idea. That's all I'm looking for. I'm not looking for critique because that's honest. When you say, no, I want your ideas, and then you push back, you didn't mean that. And you were just looking for confirmation. By the way, very human thing to do. Think about it. You go to a doctor and you serious condition, and the doctor says, oh, I have bad news. It is what we thought it was. What does every human being do? They go get a second opinion. Yeah. Go to the same doctor, same serious issue, and they go, you're all good. What does no one do? Yep. Get a second opinion. They celebrate, which is the weirdest thing because that's the time you should get the second opinion. What if they missed? So what it is it shows our just addiction to confirmation.
Well, and that should be a little check for us. If we really truthfully want some feedback, watch who we go to for that feedback. Are we going to the people that we just know always are the yes men and women and high five us and anything? Or aren't there people in our lives personally and professionally that we know that I'm not going to go to them because, well, maybe those are the people you need to go to. So the problem is kind of like when you do a survey and you say, hey, here's our new product we're just getting ready to launch. Would you buy it? Yes or no? And you see all these yeses. Well, that's really not as powerful as when they have to whip out their credit card and buy it.
Correct. Exactly. Huge difference. And anybody who's ever run a business and has participated in doing polling like that, I remember doing that years ago. Hey, if we created this new product for you, would you get it? And everybody's like, yes. Yep. And then you go, okay, it's out 2 weeks later. No one's buying it. Yeah, right. Well, because in theory, they want to be excited for you. So the people saying yes they're just trying to be supportive. But when you actually have to pay, they're like, well, I get all your other stuff. I don't need that. Whatever it is, their reason is. But you're like, what happened? Well, they were just giving you confirmation.
And let's carry that same concept over to our daily lives in social media. How many times have we all seen someone post up on, let's just say Facebook, and say, hey guys, what do you think about this problem? What should I do? And hours later, you go back to it and you see no one made a comment, but 4 people click like, and you're going, that's not what I asked. I asked, what's your opinion? I didn't say, do you like this concept or not? But you've got to get people to give some feedback so that you know where you stand. And I think that's a really, really big piece. We need to check ourselves to see who we're going to ask for that. And I know we don't have time to cover all of the 9 displays of disrespect, but what's a couple more we should be aware of?
Yeah, so another one would be interrupting. And this one is priceless because it's so often done at the boardroom and the management level. And that is, you literally think where someone else is going, you already got it figured out, so you just interrupt. Spouses are famous for doing this to each other. And by the way, everything I'm sharing, I've done as a human being. These are human behaviors. And this is why it's important to have this conversation, Mike, because it's not about the monster. It's the person in the mirror. Yeah. The monster is to say that person does it. When do I do this? I thought it was brilliant. I was working with a CEO recently, very large company in the United States, and he said, when I came to America, I had to learn how to interrupt to survive in the boardroom. Huh. And you're like, wow, how sad is that? Right? And so instead of interrupting, right, pause and let the person's full ideas go to full fruition. What happens is we think we know where they're going, which might be where they're going, but they might have a turn at the end, a twist that we didn't know what was coming, and we're taking that away from them. And even if we were 100% correct on what they were about to say, we implied their voice doesn't matter. I get to interrupt you and finish for you instead of letting you finish, right? Yeah. And so I have a friend that jokingly with a colleague would say, oh, it's efficient communication. And I'll say, well, how does that feel to your partner?
Yeah.
And they go, oh, they hate it. And so
well, it's one-sided efficiency then.
Right. And what I came up with when I talk to companies, it's a quote I've come up with because I think it's so important. Efficiency is lost when pain is caused.
Yeah.
And so many times in the corporate environment, it's so much about efficiency that we forget the pain and the harm that it's causing. And it's actually, we're losing people over it. We're losing people from sharing ideas. There's less problem solving. If you want the ultimate test of respect in the workplace in communications, can everyone say yes or no to their leadership, to their management, to their bosses without fear? That is so rare. You talk to most people in the workplace, they go, well, I mean, if they're really hyped up or no, I can't say no to everything, or I can't say yes to that. All right, there's a lack of respect then. Something's happening that your voice is being taken away from you. And interrupting is one of the worst cases of that. Now, people ask me, all right, what if I'm in the boardroom and someone in front of me is being interrupted? Then simply pause and go, excuse me. Let's say Jordan's interrupting Aaron. Hey, Jordan, we really want to hear Aaron's complete thought there. Yep. Aaron, would you please continue?
Now, what level of, in other words, when should you not do that? If Aaron is, superior or Jordan is the VP, at some point, it's not your place to say that, correct?
Well, it depends. In a healthy workplace, it would be. Yeah. If the CEO is interrupting and taking away people's voices and nobody can say, excuse me, John, I hope you don't mind. I was really curious where Sue was going there.
Yeah.
If you can't do that because they're the CEO, that's an unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
That's an unhealthy workplace relationship. And that's one of the biggest problems when you talk about respect in the workplace. People don't even know what a healthy workplace relationship looks like. They know what a hierarchy looks like, but they don't understand the idea of mutuality in the workplace. In fact, it's a word you almost never hear in corporate America. It's something that we pride ourselves on talking about with corporate leaders. Do you have mutuality in your workplace? Is this a mutual experience for everyone in the room? Or is this about hierarchy only? You can have hierarchy and mutuality. They're not separate from each other.
I like the quote on your website that says, what would it look like if every individual in your organization felt equally valued? If you asked 20, 50, 100 CEOs that, what do you think their answer is? Or maybe you have, and what can you report that their answer is when asked that question?
Well, it's interesting. When you talk to leaders and you survey them or their leadership, and you ask, is our workplace a place where respect is every day and it's founded and it's great? That's one option. 2, we've got a good culture, but we need to improve it. That's option number 2 out of the 3. Third one, we're not in a place of respect. When you do this survey, typically the leader says, we're in a great place, full of respect. And then what you see from after the leader is the highest percentage, we're in a good place, it needs help. And then another percentage that we're in dire need of help, which, by the way, if that percentage is even like 7, 10, 15%, that is dire problems, because that's a large piece of people feeling they're in a culture of disrespect and disregard. And that are the ones who were willing to say it, right? So that changes the answers. So what happens is leaders see things from their view. That's not their fault. It's the only view they know. But people act differently when the leader's not around. Yeah. Than they do when the leader's right in front of them. I've worked with military leadership. I've worked at the highest end of leaders in the Department of Defense. And I remember somebody once said to me, a general said, but nobody's using that word. It was a really degrading word. Nobody's using that word anymore, right? And the rest of the room snickered. And they said, why are you snickering? And they go, well, yes, they're still using the word. Mike's right. That word is absolutely being used. And they said, but I never hear it. And I said to the leaders, with all due respect, of course you don't. You're the leader. And that's what leaders forget. what's hidden from them. They think, no, I create this culture where nothing's hidden. You're just like a parent. Even if I have the most wonderful relationship with my kids, there's a good chance there's some things my kids don't tell me because they don't want to disappoint me. They don't want to hurt me. They don't want to concern me. And so they're not doing it because necessarily you're a bad leader. It's because they don't want to hurt you. There's many reasons, but you're not seeing everything.
Well, I mean, I think that there's probably ways to quantify that, but I think it's hard to do that as opposed to metrics for sales numbers or, analytics on your website. You can see that, cold hard facts, let's do this or that. So what do you say to an organization that might say, you know what, we're good to go? You've alluded to that already. We don't have a problem with that. But what do you then say to an organization that would say, but we might because we don't know what we don't know? How do we assess?
Yeah, well, and there's a variety of ways you can assess. One, anonymous survey. You don't do a survey where people can figure out who answered because then they're worried about how that impacts everybody. Another one is you bring from the outside. One of the biggest mistakes to do is to do everything from the inside when you're trying to find out what's wrong from the inside.
Yeah.
Because every effort you're going to make has a bias from within. Whereas when you bring somebody from the outside, they're more likely to see answers that come out of that survey and know how to ask the survey without any of the bias.
Yeah.
And they can go, hey, here's all the answers that we showed. When I work with a company, I have them do the survey before I go work with them. And I am able to bring in outside eyes on that. So let me give you an example. Someone will say, hey, our company is really respectful and wonderful when someone's in dire need of help, family emergency, personal emergency. Right? Company sees that and goes, oh, look how family-oriented we are. This is awesome. And I pause and go, why is that the only time?
Yeah.
We need to be in a dire place of emergency before people think the company turns to them. And when you say that, people are like, oh, my gosh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's just like, have you ever heard the stats about, direct mail has a 2% response rate and you're doing a great job on that campaign, or 3% or 4%. Yeah, but that's a 90-something% failure rate and you're getting exciting about that. So, yeah, why do we have to have some internal implosion for the company to sit up and go, yeah, we ought to reach out and send a thank you or a sympathy card or a whatever?
Exactly. And what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to work with someone, bring somebody in from the outside that has experience being able to handle any pushback. Because when an organization is going to do this, one of the organization's fears they can have sometime is that if I open up this can of worms, we won't be able to control it. Well, one, if there's that many problems inside your organization that we're about to discover, you more than anyone need to open up this can of worms to let it out and finally solve the problem. If that's your fear, you most need the help.
Because if you don't open up the can, it's going to explode internally at some point, and then the worms are all over the place. We may as well have them sliding out, crawling out one at a time, and deal with them, sequentially.
Exactly. And you're going to need someone that when those worms start slamming out is not from within because they're not taking it personal.
Yeah.
There's no reason for them to become defensive. So now I can facilitate the conversation because I have nothing in this game.
Yep.
Right. I have nothing in the game. And that's one thing. I just met with a leadership team recently, awesome leadership team of a company. And the great thing was I'm showing them their answers. Now, if somebody in the room is embarrassed by one of their answers, I don't know who said that.
Yep.
And no one in the room knows who said that. So the difference is some of them might be going, oh, I think John said that, or I thought Henry, but I don't know.
Yep.
So I can answer from a place of pure objectivity and just engage in an honest, inquisitive discussion on, okay, what could that mean? How is that impacting us? And what it leads to is people going, oh, I see the red flag now. We've had it for years. We haven't been able to see that. We need to address that. And that's what you want to be able to do. You want to work with somebody that can be objective, that can ask the right questions, and that's usually where people fail. They fail to ask the right questions, and then can facilitate us down a road that brings us to where we get to a culture where worst case is so rarely ever going to happen because we've built this new culture. Not that we've fixed things, we've actually transformed into this new organization that can never go back to who it was before.
Am I correct in thinking this, that as the culture is being worked on, it doesn't need to be perfect for the organization, the people, to feel like, hey, great things are happening. You don't need to go from 40% success rate to 100%. If the organization fills out this survey, this anonymous survey, and then a few weeks later they start seeing some little inclinations of improvement, and they're like, hey, we've heard you. We're going to be working on some of these things, and here comes, hey, this first we're going to do a whatever that it is. All of a sudden that momentum starts building and the employees start feeling like we've been heard and we see action and movement. It doesn't need to be fixed overnight.
Oh, and it won't be. And that's really important. Yeah, you bring up a great point there, Mike. And here's what I explain to people. Let's say that you're on a scale of you're at 0 and you're trying to get to 100. If you are only focusing on staying at 0 like this, we haven't had any accusations, we haven't had any cases, we don't know of anything horrible happening. That's their 0 point. Anything behind that's negative, right? But they're at 0. And they're saying our goal is 0, to stay at no problems. All right, well, when you fall short, you're in negative, always. Yep. Versus our goal is to shoot to that 100. If we get to 50, just 50, we are 100% better than we were at 0. Right? In fact, we're 50 times better than we were at 0, because each point counts. Yeah. Each number counts. And that's the mistake people make. They go, well, that's too aspirational, that goal you've set. That's too aspirational. All right, fall short. You're still going to be in a way better place than you are today.
Shoot for the moon, you'll still hit a star.
Exactly.
Well, Mike, it's been really great chatting with you. I think we could go on for about 14 more hours, but let's wrap it up with this. What is the best way that someone could reach out and connect with you, listen to your podcast, read through some of your teaching materials, and see more about this culture of respect?
There's 2 great ways you can do that. One, MikeSpeaks.com. Super easy to remember, MikeSpeaks.com. I'm with the Center for Respect, so they can always go there too. And our podcast is RespectPodcast.com. So if they want to listen to the Respect Podcast, every Wednesday a new episode's released. And like you do a great job, awesome job, Mike. And I interview people about how respect shows in their work, their life, and their love. And so we take from CEOs to people who work in the field of sexual education. It really depends on the discussion every week.
Excellent. Well, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I'll make sure those links are in the show notes.
Thank you, Mike, for having me on. It's been a fun conversation.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.